Welcome to this presentation, What's a Congregation to Do? I'm Kris Bentley, and I work at Lexington Theological Seminary directing the Bivocational Ministry Research Project at LTS, which is funded through grants from the Lilly Endowment. In this video, we explore the scenario where congregations are transitioning to bivocational ministry, calling a bivocational minister for the first time after years of being served by a minister who did not have another job. Exploring this scenario reveals challenges inherent in bivocational ministry. As some recent authors have pointed out, including Mark Eddington, who wrote Bi-vocational, Returning to the Roots of Ministry, and Jeffrey MacDonald, who wrote Part-Time is Plenty, Thriving Without Full-Time Clergy. This scenario of transitioning to bivocational ministry primarily impacts Protestant, mainline Protestant congregations in North America, which are historically European American. This is because generally in recent decades, these congregations have had enough financial resources to compensate ministers who did not have another job outside the church. Yet now many are facing financial challenges which cause them to rethink this. So one element that makes this scenario challenging is that these congregations are facing diminished financial resources and possibly congregational decline. Often these congregations have bent over backwards to continue supporting a full-time single vocational pastor, thinking it was the best model of ministry. This means the other problem they are probably facing is that they have been steeped in what Jeffrey MacDonald describes as the full-time bias. There are some quotes here on this screen from his book, Part-Time is Plenty. MacDonald describes the full-time bias as the belief that having a professional clergy person handle a long list of duties on congregants' behalf is better than entrusting such ministry responsibilities to lay people. The full-time bias is a one-size-fits-all bias toward full-time ministry as the model that's always superior, and any church that can afford it ought to have it. Congregations are so steeped in this bias that many believe full-time ministry is a necessary prerequisite for legitimacy. It means that these congregations often move toward bivocational ministry as a model, primarily out of a sense of scarcity, with concerns about financial challenges and possible congregational decline. They are primarily seeing bivocational ministry through the narrative that we at LTS have described as the sign of the times narrative. Often congregations enter this process discouraged and even afraid. They are concerned about numerous things. Things like, what kind of a pastor would want to come to us? How will we work within the search and call process? What impact will a bivocational minister have on our growth? How will ministry get done? And is this one more step in the process of decline for our church? It also means, in some instances, these congregations are beginning to seriously contend with issues that congregations led by bivocational ministers for a longer period of time have a lot of experience dealing with. Issues such as clarifying how to foster financial stability, addressing resource gaps, finding supplemental ways to support ministers, living within a search and call system not developed with them in mind, identifying gifts for ministry among lay leaders and nurturing those gifts, and perceiving and measuring vitality in ways appropriate for bivocational ministry. And I think we can sum this up as that numbers don't tell the real story for bivocational ministry. In his book, Bi-vocational, Returning to the Roots of Ministry, in Chapter 2, Mark Eddington shares two questions that were powerful tools when a congregation he was leading moved toward the bivocational model. The questions were, what do congregation members expect the pastor to do? And how necessary is it for the pastor to do that? Eddington explains how the two questions helped the congregation he was leading begin to examine how they did ministry. These two questions led to other questions as well and helped the congregation develop a more group-centered culture where they were in the ministry together. These are good questions for all congregations to consider, whether they are led by a solo bivocational pastor or a ministry team with multiple staff members. These two questions might be joined by a third question. Who else in the congregation has been gifted to do that? This third question can help a congregation move towards seeing gifts that are already present in the congregation. Questions like these help congregations reorient their model of ministry from one which is pastor-centered ministry toward one that is shared leadership for ministry. Questions like these help congregations reflect on what their ministry might be, shift away from a sense of scarcity and towards a sense of sufficiency as they consider how to use the various resources for ministry present in their congregation. The good news is there's wisdom out there to answer questions. In our interviews at LTS, we heard from pastors and lay leaders in congregations with long time experience in bivocational ministry, primarily in rural communities and within the African American context. And we learned about traditions that worked really well with bivocational arrangements, often emerging out of them. A few examples include congregations have practices of identifying gifts for ministry, involving young people, children, people at all stages in life in participating in worship and leadership in the congregation. And the result is that they can see who might be a good pastoral leader, and they end up often having individuals move into ministry and become pastors in communities and congregations where they were baptized or raised in the faith. They've developed informal ways of supporting one another and making friends and developing friendships and support systems that supplement official ministerial meetings and search and call processes that were really organized with full-time ministers and single vocational ministers in mind. Some congregations where the pastor lives and has that second job right there in the community, in the same community where the congregation is located, have really developed strong interwoven connections with their community. And that means that both the job in the church and outside of the church work together to strengthen the ministry and the pastoral leadership. And also, congregations have developed traditions of supporting their pastors in ways that supplement traditional compensation and really tell the pastor, we value you. These can be things like love gifts that are collected throughout the year, and also annual pastor appreciation programs that are really strong, including observing the pastor's anniversary every year. And these practices and traditions really come on the understanding within congregations that you need to give church members the opportunity to recognize and express gratitude and celebrate their pastor, not just in the role as the pastor, but also to let that person know, we see what you're doing. We see how you work here in the church, but you also expend a lot of energy in that other job. And we know that the compensation you get for that other job is helping you to pay your bills and undergirding the financial stability of our congregation. So those are just 4 examples of some traditions, but it tells us that sharing the stories of bivocational ministry really do show us a way forward. We can learn from those who have had long-time experience with bivocational ministry, and that can help those congregations that are just transitioning into bivocational ministry. The stories out there and the stories from long-time bivocational ministry congregations are sources of wisdom, tried and true. Thank you for watching this presentation.